Welcome everyone. You're watching In the Crosshairs, and my special guest today is Dan Roberts. And Dan has been a returning guest. This is, I think, your third, maybe fourth time. But I think one of the first times that you came on the show, Dan, and it's been a few months, we did talk about the Senate confirmation hearings, and also at that point, the president was still trying to determine which nominee that he was going to pick. So we're going to be returning back to that topic, and I want to put it into context for everybody. This is the Saturday. We are recording the Saturday right after the Friday that the Senate did not, or they moved the confirmation of the Judge Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh. They moved his confirmation up into the entire Senate.
Right.
For a vote. However, they made a caveat to it, and that said they were going to give Senate Democrats an opportunity to engage the FBI and engage them in a follow-up background check, or potentially question some of the witnesses that have come forward to make allegations against Brett Kavanaugh.
Right.
So they made a deal yesterday. So we're going to be talking about what went on the past week. And just as a preface, I want to say that I really enjoy a democracy, Dan, and I don't mind people having different views on important topics.
Sure.
You know, I get that, and I really enjoy the debate. I enjoy very honest debate, and I don't want my lists and my viewers to think that I'm against Democrats or I'm against a different. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to listen. There's some topics, that, particularly here in the Crosshairs, of course, we don't really bend on the Second Amendment.
Right.
I see the Second Amendment just as important to Democrats as it is to Republicans, as it is to libertarians, as it is to Reform Party members. It doesn't really matter what your political persuasion is. The Second Amendment is just as important as the First Amendment. So no political party goes out there and say, well, you shouldn't be able to express your opinion. At least we hope they, right? Well, everybody, respects the First Amendment, and you and I know, agree on this. It's no different in the Second Amendment, which we acknowledge to be a God-given gift. No government can really tell me how I can defend myself, and if I choose to defend myself with firearms, then I don't think the government should stop me.
Right.
And that's for all Americans, Democrats. Yeah. However, I am going to say that I'm going to be very critical against the Senate Democrats in leadership positions who I believe are using this hearing to benefit their own elections coming up. So it could be in November they're running for re-election, or it could be that they have future aspirations for bigger office, for the presidency. And because of that, they've used this Senate confirmation hearing as a political ploy. Mm-hmm. And I think what's happening right now is against the Constitution. I don't think anybody has special rights, right? So if you're a victim of a crime, there's laws that dictate what you can do about it. So you can make a complaint to the police, your local police. Potentially, you can make a complaint with your district attorney. But one way or the other, you have to take steps to make those complaints if you understand that criminal activity has occurred. So when you don't do that, it's a problem. Your credibility is lacking because you're coming out, over 35 years later, making an accusation that can't be proven, that you can't prove. You have no corroboration. I see it all as a show. So I'm going to just go ahead and introduce you again, Dan. I'm so happy to have you on. Him and I are good friends. We're colleagues. Dan is a gun rights writer like me, and also researcher. And also he is an NRA instructor for many years. And so he's a good guy. He's on our side.
Thanks, Raquel.
You're welcome.
So yeah, I mean, you remember when we talked in the springtime, I had predicted, my assessment was, of the short list of candidates that President Trump was looking at, my gut was telling me Kavanaugh was going to be the appointee, and it turned out he was. And I said that because I'm a big fan of his originalist take on the Constitution, which is very much in line with Justice Scalia. and particularly with his dissension in D.C. about so-called assault weapons. And I think what we're seeing is it's a combination of several different reasons that the Democrats are trying to stop him. There's been a lot of talk about overturning Roe v. Wade. While I agree with that would be desirable, I don't think it's quite as easy as they're making it sound like. Like he's just going to go on the bench and the next day Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned. It's not that simple.
Right. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean he's publicly stated that he has the deepest amount of respect for long-standing established laws. But they're using that fear to gin up their base for the midterms, like you said. They're terrified of his stance on the Second Amendment. I mean, that was obvious during the hearings. Dianne Feinstein ridiculously tried to redefine the words common use. Apparently, in her mind, if you don't have something physically in your hand engaging with it at that moment, it's not in common use. So that would be like
that's
saying,
not what the decision said. That's not what the courts have said. Right.
Right. So it would be like saying, the Honda Accord is one of the most common cars sold in America. Apparently, Dianne thinks if you're not actively driving it, that means it's not the most common sedan in America.
That doesn't make sense.
What? But what I'm more alarmed by is what I've seen with these hearings.
It's like saying, you know what? I was looking this up just because I was curious. But the most often eaten food is potatoes.
Right.
It's potatoes, right? So that's like saying, no, you don't like potatoes, so it's not common.
Right. Right.
Right. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
But what I am much more alarmed by what I've seen in the last 10 days with these hearings and the statements from progressive Democrats on the left, that quite frankly, and this is going to sound like hyperbole to a lot of people. Let me preface this. I've been fire rescue for over 20 years. I've been shot at. I've had a gun put to my head in Atlantic City in the projects when a victim faked a heart attack so that the crew would be separated so they could rob us because they thought we had drugs on the ambulance.
Wow, that's scary.
I've been in car wrecks. I've almost wrecked my motorcycle more than once. 5 years ago, I'm convinced I came very close to dying of hypothermia after I slipped on ice in a rural area and severely broke my leg and was literally dragging myself on my stomach over hand to get back to my house to call 911 to get help because I couldn't walk, I couldn't crawl. There's not a whole lot. I'm 45 now. There's not a whole lot left in the world that actually scares me. Gotcha. What I'm hearing coming from progressive Democrats terrifies me. Terrifies me as an American, terrifies me as a man, terrifies me as a father. I'm almost to the point where I'm ready to tell my son, forget about marriage, forget about dating. In fact, your best course of action is to not even talk to a girl for any reason. Because apparently the new standard is going to be somebody can come out of the woodwork 35 years down the road, make an unsubstantiated claim with absolutely no supporting evidence, and destroy your life.
And destroy your life. And it does destroy your life. False allegations on somebody, false allegations on somebody really is destructive.
Yeah.
And of course it serves no good purpose because then, it's like crying wolf, right. The boy crying wolf. Because then now he's not going to be believed when it's really true.
That's right.
And this is the problem I have with the Democrats. Sexual assault is a serious problem. And it happens in both ways, like men assault women, women assault men. And although the majority is men,
right.
It's a very serious topic, and we want to go after the people who commit the crime. So we're not going to blanket criminalize people. We don't do that in America. Okay.
But that's what the left wants to do.
Because you're a man, that doesn't make me think you're more likely now to be violent or abusive. I'm going to hold you accountable to your own actions because that's all we can do. We can't blame men, women.
But if you listen,
just go out there and say, "Oh my gosh, he touched me the wrong way. He rubbed me a little bit wrong, and now I get to go, make complaints." It diminishes the real offensiveness of sexual assault, which is offensive. We're not against it.
But if you listen, if you listen to the far left progressive social justice warriors, that's exactly what they're suggesting, is that all men are automatically suspect violent attackers because they're men. It's the whole thing about the patriarchy and white privilege. And I just found out this morning that the second accuser, this woman named Ramirez, also happens to say, the one who said that she wasn't even sure it was him, and then suddenly, after 6 days of consulting with her lawyers, thinks it might have been him. Well, it turns out that it turns out she sits on the board of directors of an organization called SPAN, S-P-A-N, and their position is non-negotiable. And it basically says that sexual violence against women is all women are oppressed. It is systemic, and that any ageism, sexism, patriarchy, anything that they decide to label it is defined as violence. And this is something I've heard other commentators talk about for the last couple of years. When the left redefined, when we heard this a couple of years ago with now trigger words were violent speech, it's a way for them to rationalize or at least try to justify their own physical violence. Because if they've convinced themselves that words are the same as being punched in the face, then they can justify their own physical attacks.
Right.
It's a complete rewriting of the language. I mean, we're living.
It's false. It's like it's a false pretense.
Right.
And the pretense is there. The reason why they're doing it, it's politically motivated, because we go back to those two topics that they're concerned about, their dispute with conservatives.
Yes.
And that's the Second Amendment and abortion.
Right.
So rather than going they have every right to go there, and they can talk about their philosophy, and they can try to be convincing to their colleagues on the Senate. That look, our position is we support abortion, we support anti-Second Amendment laws, and this is why. Now, now you get to decide. This is how a democracy works. But the Democrats failed. We know they have failed in those two topics because of the elections last year, in 2016. And the election says something, because people understand that when you're voting in, particularly the president, we understand as voters, most of us, that now that president is going to get to appoint to the United States Supreme Court, very big position, and they get to appoint that person. Now, we want somebody alongside our ideology, and because we elected President Trump, we elected him. This is what I got to get across to people. We elected Trump. Trump gets to pick.
Right.
Okay? That's how the law is. The Senate Democrats want to be treated special. They want special treatment. They want them to be above the law. That they can just bring on whoever they want, politically motivated, in my opinion, to say whatever they want, and they don't follow the law. They haven't followed the procedure. Now, if something like that happened to me, I don't get to call the FBI.
Right.
I gotta go to the police.
Yeah.
If these women have claims, even if it's because sometimes the statute of limitations say they still can make a claim. Go make a claim. Right. Go.
Right.
But to insert this into this process because they don't want abortion and 2A. Okay? That's all they want abortion and they don't support 2A. That's the only reason they're doing this. But they're being disingenuous with all of us. Yeah. Because because they win on their persuasiveness. Right. Now they have to resort to literally asking the American people to let them be above the law. Right. They're special, and they now get to behave above the law for another 7 days. Right. I hope we confirm Kavanaugh. I think the Democrats in the Senate are out of control. I hope it happens. This morning, I found on Fox. Do you think it's going to happen this morning? No, but this morning I found a report that now Maryland authorities have publicly said they're willing to open a state-level criminal investigation if a victim comes forward. Now, it'll be interesting to see if she actually comes forward. I tend to believe, and there's been some things that have come out
And let me back up a little bit. I watched her testimony. Her testimony was powerful. It was.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say credible because that denotes that you think you believe her, and I don't. Like Kavanaugh has said, I think something happened to her at some point in her life. Right. I don't think Brett Kavanaugh had anything to do with it.
I think that's true too.
But last night I found out that apparently she may have lied to the Senate when she said she was a research psychologist, because under California law, she does not have a psychologist license, and you are not allowed to publicly represent yourself as a psychologist.
She's a professor, but she's not a certified psychologist.
No, I read the transcript of her testimony. Okay. She's a professor, and then she said that she was a research psychologist.
But she's not. And
under California law, you are not allowed to publicly represent yourself as a psychologist if you don't hold a license. She made a few
misrepresentations. So her original letter changed.
Yep.
People were in different places at different times. I think it's absolutely horrendous that now a high school buddy of, former friend of Judge Kavanaugh is now, in the hot seat, this guy judge, apparently he has PTSD or whatever the case is, he had some issues as a high school, in high school. And now all of a sudden that's on the judge. Mm-hmm. Like, why are we talking about his friend in high school? This is how bizarre it is when all they want to do is go back to the abortion, the 2A has nothing to do. Can you imagine? This is insane, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. I grew up in the 80s. You grew up in the 80s, more or less. And, we did things differently. And, times change. Just like our parents might have done things differently. And other generations, have their thing. So it's kind of, you go to your friend's house, you drink beer, you do whatever. And it's the kind of thing you're not telling your parents, because
Right.
It's the kind of thing that's private, I think. And it's something that, it's a learning experience. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect. And
the fact of the matter is, when I was in high school,
scrutinized, the poor judge's friends in high school. It's really outlandish. Like, anybody is susceptible to any type of complaint. It makes people not want to go into public service.
Yeah. I mean, people... I think a lot of people will recognize what I'm about to say. I don't know that they would be willing to admit it. And I'm not suggesting that this has anything to do with diminishing legitimate sexual assault cases. I have a daughter. I mean, I'm not going to delegitimize actual cases. Right. But the fact of the matter is when I was at those high school parties, and even after high school, there were definitely some girls or women that were rather aggressive in what they wanted. It's not a one-way street. It's not a one-way street, everybody. It goes both ways.
It does.
You have to be. Let's play in the real world here. And in the real world, there are girls and women out there that get drunk and get frisky, and they're not shy about what they want. I mean, that's just reality.
I know.
I live in reality.
It's hard to explain, generations change and norms change. It's really hard, in hindsight.
Yeah.
It's really hard to go back and be like, how did you do that? Everything has a context.
Yeah.
And people, honestly, we're Americans, so we're treated innocent until proven guilty. So when and believe me, people make false allegations all the time, that whether, there's some kind of motive behind it. I don't always know what the motives are, but I think the motives are pretty clear in this case.
Yeah. And that's the thing is what terrifies me is how many people are just absolutely willing to throw away due process and the idea of innocent until proven guilty. I mean, we're living in Orwell's 1984 right now. I mean, off the top of my head, I can remember the Emmett Till case in the 30s when racism was real big, and he was a black boy that was accused of raping 2 white women, and he was lynched. The Duke lacrosse case was much more recent. That was just within the last 10 years, and those Duke lacrosse players' lives were ruined. And then it turned out the prosecutor was corrupt and he was fired. I know I've seen news reports of 3 different women in 3 different states in the last 6 weeks have been charged and sent to prison for lying about sexual attacks. I found another one of a lieutenant colonel in the Army whose accuser was ordered to pay $8.3 million to him for false accusations. Apparently, this guy was He was on a fast track. It was like on the verge of being named a general. And these allegations came out, and it completely derailed his entire career. So to suggest that false accusation cases don't happen at all is absolutely a flat-out lie. To suggest that it's almost like a lot of these people were like, well, that's just the price we pay. Oh, well. Matter of fact, I wish I could remember her name. I saw the tweet 6 months ago, and it was a woman, and she said something, I'm going to paraphrase, I'm probably going to quote her wrong, but it was something about, if innocent men being convicted is the price we pay to believe the Me Too movement, I'm willing to pay that price. Well, that's great, lady. You're willing to pay that price.
Awful.
What about the innocent
scary.
men?
Very scary.
Yeah. It's terrifying. It really is.
It's convicting somebody who hasn't committed a crime. If you understand that. It's a public conviction of somebody who hasn't committed a crime. And it doesn't, particularly when it's sexual in nature, that false allegation really never leaves that person.
No.
So you have this judge who's had an entire career, top of his class, captain of the basketball team, Yale, law school, all of his record, all the background checks that he's already had gone through. And time after time, time after time and time, you have all of these people talking about, what a decent man he is. And then he had about 55 women come forward, and these were women that he's known since high school. And they all, basically affirmed that the guy that we know to this day, some of them,
right.
is not the person that is being creamed in the media. And we have the one person, not one corroboration of that event that
right.
may or may not have happened. I don't know either. And that's it.
Right.
And just consider all of the other women who come forward who have firsthand knowledge.
Right.
They know Brett. They know him since high school. He's just not that kind of guy. I kind of relate to Brett Kavanaugh because I went to all Catholic schools. I know what those Catholic circles are like. And we were really, the kids in my grammar school, St. Joseph's in Astoria, we were so close-knit. We were so tight. We were really good friends. And we hung out together all the time. Did we drink and stuff? Of course we did. We smoked cigarettes in the bathroom. We did a lot of things that maybe teenagers today wouldn't do.
Right.
But we took care of each other. So if we were all hanging out, it was kind of late. It was a Friday night. We were in the schoolyard. We used to hang out in the schoolyard. We used to hang out in the gym.
Right.
The boys would be like, all right, how are you getting home, Raquel?
Right.
You're the girl here. Yeah, can one of you guys walk me home?
Right.
And that was, okay, boom, and they walked me home. And the thing is, that's how, I just remember it. And I also remember, when you're raised in that, we go to church every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
We had that constant moral, save sex for marriage. And I'm not saying we'll save sex for marriage, but at least we sort of had that moral ground. And I look at Brett like he could have been one of my classmates, and all of my classmates, they ended up, becoming police officers and firemen and successful and, respectable family men.
Right.
And that was our, and I can't even imagine like one of us from my background, being falsely accused of something. And I would also be the first to come forward, just like these women have come forward to defend him. And I don't know why the public has to give them credibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I would be willing to bet that most of the people that are in this, believe her movement would be the first ones to scream from the rooftops if it was their husband, their son, their brother, their uncle, their very good lifelong friend that was falsely accused. And like you, I have no problem with debate. I've said for years, I despise everything that Westboro Baptist Church stands for and does. The vile things that they say and do it.
They go to
veterans' funerals.
Veterans' funerals, yeah.
I absolutely despise them. If I was standing there, I'd probably have a very hard time controlling myself. But I would still be willing to fight to the death to defend their right to be that way. What I cannot and will not tolerate is lies and hypocrisy. And the lies and hypocrisy that are coming from the progressive left are so obvious, so transparent, and so outrageous, they cannot stand unchallenged. To hear a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Hirono, tell men on public television, sit down and shut up. Excuse me?
Right.
Who do you think you are, lady?
And then she said she is the senator from Hawaii.
Yes.
And then she said after that, you must believe her.
Right.
You have to believe her. And I'm thinking, no, I don't. Actually, right. I've got a brain. I can think. So I can weigh evidence and determine what I think is true or not. But just to flat out tell her constituent, I don't know who she's talking to. She's talking to her colleagues. She's talking to her constituents. She's not talking to me.
Right.
Because I don't, that's not up to her for me to decide who to believe, okay? This woman is so arrogant that she wants to tell all men, sit down, shut up, and believe her because I say so.
Right, right. And she actually said that the reason she won't vote for Kavanaugh is because she doesn't like his judicial decisions. She's believing Ford.
That's all it is.
She said, I'm believing her because I don't like his judicial decisions. Not because there's evidence, but because she doesn't like his ideology.
And she's a woman. She doesn't like his ideology. She wants to win. She wants to delay as much as possible so that maybe the Democrats take over in the next election and they get to block any confirmation. These people, they don't like Trump. They're the anti-Trumpers. They're the fanatics that it doesn't matter what Trump picked his nose today. Trump dropped his toothbrush in the toilet. They're just out of control. They don't leave him alone. They're very, very anti-Trump. And this is why they are so much against his appointment. It's not just against the philosophy. This is just flat out against the president. But guess what, Democrats? We voted him in.
Right.
It's not up to her.
Right.
It's not up to the Professor Ford.
Right.
It's simply not. They are not above the law, and they are certainly not above the truth.
Right.
But they're asking us to give them that.
Yep.
Corona is flat out telling me, don't worry about your truth and don't think.
Yep.
What I need you to do is just believe her because she's a woman.
Yeah.
I'm mortified. I was mortified when she said that.
Yeah.
Because it absolutely insults my intelligence.
Yeah.
Because she's saying that I can't think.
Right.
I have to go with the woman.
Right.
She may or may not be telling the truth. We have no proof of it. Okay.
Right.
But because she's a woman, her owner says I have to follow her.
Right.
And that is so arrogant, it's so disingenuous, and anybody who would support a lunatic like her you guys are not thinking, okay? You're just not even using your head. You're saying she's a Democrat, I support her political philosophy, so when she tells me to believe something, I just do it.
Yeah.
That makes you a sheep. It just makes you're just following along, but you're not thinking for yourself. So I'm just saying, think for yourself. We have to reject women. We have to reject elected officials who operate like this woman. Because it's unreal. She wants to be above the law. She wants to be above the truth. And I'm saying that you can't be.
Right. And then we have Senator Chris Coons from Delaware saying in a televised interview that I don't remember his exact quote, but it was basically like he's guilty and he has to prove he's innocent. And the number of people, including members of the Senate, that are openly saying we should overturn one of the cornerstones of our justice system, the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, is and should be terrifying to everyone.
Right. That's
These
exactly
people
right.
are signaling that they don't care about your constitutional rights. They care about power and they care about getting their way. Is it any wonder when they're now kind of revealing their real inner selves Is it any wonder that the left has been pushing so hard to try to disarm everybody? Well, when you want to be a tyrant in the future, a logical step would be to make sure the people you plan to rule over can't fight back.
Right. And that's history.
Right.
So, you know, when despotic governments in history wanted to take full control of their people for abusive purposes, by the way, the first thing that they do is disarm. They want to disarm you because they don't want you to fight back. Right? They want to be able to control the citizenship. And this is just, you know, in history. And Hitler did it, many others.
Stalin did it.
Stalin did it. So we're 2018. We live in America. We're Americans. We support these very fundamental issues. We have a right to defend ourselves, both against our criminals, you know, common criminals, or against a despotic government, if that should happen.
Right.
You know, we know that, you know, those are the things we respect. We respect our freedom of speech as long as we're not, you know, inciting violence, right? We're not screaming fire in a crowded movie theater to incite for a dangerous situation. But we have thoughts and we want to think and we want to talk without hypocrisy, you know, and that's liberty. So we hold these things true. Another fundamental point of our Constitution is this presumption of innocence. Now, can you just imagine you have a world without it? What that means is that you go ahead and you convict people based on nothing. So you can make an accusation, and now the person who's being accused, they have the burden of proving that they're not guilty of this crime. Do you know how difficult that is? How do you prove that you didn't do something, right? Right. You know, and the idea is that it really is fundamental in our criminal justice system that the prosecutor has to prove that a crime has been committed, and they have to prove that with facts and witnesses, and it has, you know, there's a whole series, you know, it's a course of action. In fact, even, you know, on a criminal basis, it's a jury that decides, jury of your peers, and they have to decide beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. It's a very high burden, beyond a reasonable doubt still, that burden of a jury of your peers making a decision whether this crime was committed. It's fundamental in our criminal justice system, and what the liberal Democrats are asking us to do, just because, don't forget, it's the abortion and the 2A, that's what it is. So what they're asking us to do is to take that fundamental principle and put it in the garbage. Just never mind, because we're doing the Me Too movement now. And the Me Too movement is more important to us than we can just lie and we can just make it up and we're above the law. Yeah, that is really the point I'm trying to make here with this program today. That they are operating above the law, and they're asking us it's a whole different criminal justice system if we're going to go ahead and start putting people on trial based on accusations and not proof.
Raquel, it's the Salem witch trials all over again. You're a single woman and you own a black cat. We think you're a witch. We're gonna dunk you in the lake, and if you survive, you're a witch. And if you drown, oh well, you weren't a witch, but you're dead. It's the Salem witch trials all over again. Prove you're innocent.
You know, there's of course the due process. The due process is that you have a right to face your accuser. You have a right to have notice and hearing. The really main two components of due process is notice and hearing. So someone accuses you of something, number one, you have to be noticed that the accusation has been made, and then you have to be heard by preferably an impartial judge, right? So you get in front of an impartial judge who gets to hear both sides and look at the evidence, or potentially, you know, a grand jury, you know, who have to. But at the end of the day, the prosecutor still has to have probable cause. Right. And how do they, you know, they have some type of proof that this crime actually happened. Right. And then, you know, then you can solicit a grand jury to see whether there is probable cause. And now they move it to the, you know, to a trial. In other words, the reason why we call ourselves free, because these things are a process, okay? So, in fact, Judge Brett Kavanaugh has the same due process rights that you and I have and everybody else have. Right. So what the Senate Democrats are asking us to do is to put that aside That makes them above the law, and it takes away due process from Brett Kavanaugh. And I have to believe that if the American people understood this principle of due process, and we're all entitled to it, including Brett, including the nominee, is entitled, has protection under the law. We all do. Once we start having people above the law, we've got real problems.
Well, I mean, you have a criminal justice background in college like I do. And all week I've been arguing with people, it's mostly women, let them investigate and look for the evidence. What evidence? I'll tell you, and I started getting a little snarky because I was getting frustrated. I said, you know what? Here's a fun little home experiment you can do yourself. Walk into your local police station, tell them that a crime committed a year ago, that you have no videotape, because in 1982 there was no smartphones. Home security systems didn't have cameras. So you have no video, you have no DNA, you have no fingerprints, you have no fiber evidence because the clothes you were wearing 35 years ago were thrown out the minute you outgrew them. And every person that you claim is a witness has denied that it ever happened, but demand that they initiate an investigation anyway. At best, you're going to be laughed out of the building. At worst, they're going to refer you for a psych evaluation. That is not how criminal investigations work. You have to have a starting point. You have to have a witness. You have to have physical evidence. You have to have something to start with. And in her case, there is nothing to start with. What are the FBI is going to go to the evidence store? And as soon as I point these things out, of course, they get all annoyed and pissed off and change the subject. And, oh, you just hate women and, complete red herrings. Because they don't want to acknowledge the reality is there is no corroborative evidence at all.
Right.
None.
And the FBI, isn't going to find any, and they're certainly not going to find anything, in 7 days, unless they just, keep putting forth these,
I was going to say, wait to see if more people come forward this week. Oh, well, now we have to investigate these claims.
Yeah, they're going to want to postpone it. And again, I want to reiterate this point about the postponing, why it's so important to Democrats. We have an election coming up. Right now, the Republicans have control of the Congress and the president and the executive office. Now, this doesn't, in history, we know that always changes. Right. Okay, it's usually not for long that one party controls both the legislature and the executive office.
Yeah.
But we do now. We do right now. Okay, I don't want to say we, I just want to say the Republicans. So they are in control. They can move this vote in just on a partisan vote, just Republicans. So what the Democrats have done is, because they just want to win, okay, it's not really about the democracy part. They kind of handpick, one of the Republicans who's not running for re-election, so he's not worried, he's not beholden to his constituents, really. Right. Right. So he's not running for re-election. He's going to retire. His name is Flake. They put him in a room and they say, you have to help us. You have to help us. We're above the law. Judge Kavanaugh, forget about due process. We don't believe in that. We're above the law. You got to do what we say. And guess what? I don't know. Pay off. I don't know. You're going to have a job here. Who knows what went on in that room? But they made some kind of deal. So we have this lone Republican, who comes out and says, look, I support Brett Kavanaugh. I'm a Republican. I support Brett Kavanaugh. We're going to confirm him. We're going to move him out of the committee and put him on the floor. However, I want you all to do this FBI bogus investigation. I call it, it's not that the FBI are bogus. It's that, they're into, federal crimes. If they want to do another background check, I suppose they can. Right. But as far as, they can interview witnesses, but there are none. So witnesses wouldn't be like a group of women from the medical association or something, or the professors union or whatever, and they say, me too. Right. That's not corroboration. Okay, that doesn't count. All right, it means nothing. We need firsthand knowledge. That's your witness. You need firsthand knowledge. You have to put somebody there who saw you there and saw, there has to be something. If there's not physical evidence, there has to be witness testimony. And like you said, both of us have criminal justice background. And any criminal investigator, can try to ask questions within 4, 5 days, 6 days, whatever time they have. But they're not going to come up with anything.
No. And that was the point that everybody's been making, is that the FBI is not going to find anything.
It's just a ploy to move beyond the midterm election so that the Democrats, that was the point I wanted to make. So the Democrats get control. And now they got the bullets in their court, and they just will refuse to even call it Brett Kavanaugh for a vote.
Right. And like you were so offended by what Hirono said. And what I get offended by is by statements by, Blumenthal and Feinstein and everybody, how dare you suggest that this is politically motivated? There's a famous saying, and I don't mean to be vulgar, but the famous saying is, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. My 9-year-old son could tell that this is politically motivated. Don't you dare insult my intelligence, you sanctimonious bastards. Give me a break. I mean, it's so obvious. It's not even funny.
Obvious. Yeah.
I can at least respect.
She held the letter. She had the letter since July. She could have kept it confidential and being confidential was that it could be held confidential within the committee.
Right.
But you had to tell the person who's being accused, because otherwise there's no due process there. Mm-hmm. So they were like behind the scenes, lawyer up, get some advice. Now all of a sudden the victim, is changing their story.
Well, remember how she said remember how she supposedly couldn't come to D.C. on Monday for the hearing because she was afraid to fly? And then when she testified, she admitted that she flies all the time.
All the time, yeah, for business and pleasure.
Well, that's another false statement under oath.
Her lawyer was telling her, no, we got to stall this. However way we have to stall this so that President Trump doesn't get his nominee through. And I'm sorry, Democrats. You might not like Trump, and that's your prerogative. But the reality is that we voted for him, so he gets to pick.
Well,
next time around, if you all elect a Democrat, well, they get to pick. So it's just a matter of a democracy. They don't want a democracy, Dan.
No, they want a totalitarian left progressive state. Period. This is about power and control. Period. And I'll quote their messiah. King Obama once famously said that elections have consequences.
That's right.
Deal with it.
They do.
It's Lindsey Graham is my rep, and I'm not a really big supporter of his. I think he flip-flops too often. Yeah. But when he went nuclear the other day, I was almost jumping out of my chair. I was so happy because it's been long overdue, and I don't understand why the leadership of the Republican Party does not recognize that these progressive Democrats don't even acknowledge a rule book of decorum. It is absolutely laughable to listen to Cory Booker and Dianne Feinstein and Klobuchar and Blumenthal all wag their fingers and lecture about the decorum of the Senate and the blah, blah, blah. Are you kidding me? Give me a break.
They made it a freak show.
Yes.
So we also had that Senator Harris, and again, Hirona really frustrated me because this is even before the allegations came out. She was grilling, the judge as if he was a criminal on the stand. She wasn't treating him like a respectful human being. She was questioning him in a way that he was some kind of criminal. Nobody ever called him a criminal. She just doesn't see. She just doesn't like those two things, that he's the political philosophy, she's in a disagreement. So my advice to her would be, well, use your persuasion, your communication abilities to convince others about your philosophy. I don't have any problem with that. Go do it. That's what I do.
Right.
But to pretend that you're attacking somebody in the way that you do, for the full public to hear is if you're some self-righteous, I don't need proof. I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to insist that you follow me.
Yeah.
I think all of them have to be voted out. I don't know how a Democrat, a Republican who just respects themselves can keep these people into office, because they're really so arrogant to assume that the president's choice has to be treated like a criminal. And look what Chuck Schumer said. We're going to take him down no matter what, no matter what it takes. We didn't even start the hearing.
Right. Yeah,
this is how the Senate Democrats behave. They're out of their minds, and they have to be voted out by the people.
20 minutes after Kavanaugh was introduced by Trump at that nighttime press announcement about his nomination,
yes,
Schumer was on record publicly saying we're going to do everything we can to delay. That's right.
And they knew it, and the Democrats know this, that this was a delay tactic all the way, and they got some steam because they got a lot of press, and of course the Times and everybody jumps on the story because the press is generally very progressive. You and I both know that. But so they jump onto it. Now the Democrats are like, oh, giddy, like, oh, this is working. Oh my God, this is working. So they keep hammering home these ridiculous allegations that somebody came out and said gang rape.
I am so glad that you brought that up.
Yes.
I am so glad you brought that up. Now, to protect myself, I have to preface this by saying it's my opinion, Mr. Avenatti. In my opinion, you are a bottom-feeding scumbag seeking to prolong your 15 minutes of fame as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, he's known as the prostitute lawyer or something.
The porn star lawyer.
The porn star lawyer, yeah.
This woman's allegations are so over-the-top insane. Now all of a sudden it goes from, well, he tried to grope me through my clothes when he was a teenager, to a federal judge who has been investigated 6 times by the FBI.
You're right.
Is now suddenly accused of leading a drug and gang rape ring. Or who believes this nonsense?
Right. And the reason why we know it's nonsense is because he's kept, he has clear records of his background, head of his class, captain of the basketball team. I don't know about you, but I know the boys and girls that were involved in sports when I was in high school.
Right.
I mean, we practice every day. I was on the St. John's Prep varsity volleyball team. I also played gymnastics. And the reality is that, us kids, involved in sports like that, it's very difficult to be drug dealers because number one, you don't have time. After practice, you got to take the bus home, you got to get home, you got to have dinner, you got to do your homework, you got to go to sleep. I mean, that's life, It's not saying that we didn't have fun on the weekends and things like that on occasion, but the idea is that you can't be head of your class, you can't get accepted into Yale college. You can't do all of these fantastic things while you're selling drugs and running a sex site.
And on top of that, it turns out that she was in college during this time frame where this allegedly happened. So you have an adult woman claiming or admitting that she went not once, not twice, not 3 times, but saying that she went to 10 different parties where she claims she knows from personal knowledge that girls were being drugged and gang raped, and she did nothing about it.
Yeah! That was just so outrageous. I felt so bad for the judge when he gave his testimony on Thursday. Last Thursday. He made me cry. I felt that he was so sincere.
Well, have you seen the
he really has an incredible background, very successful, and it must really hurt to be accused of something, so out of character. It must hurt really hard. I have, and I want to hit 2 points. Have you seen the latest? Now they're complaining that he was too animated in his denials. He doesn't have the right temperament because he was angry and They'll say anything.
He was angry and he was emotional. So that means he doesn't have the right temperament. Well, excuse me. I think most people would be furious if they were accused of what he was with no evidence. So you're damn right. I'm going to be angry and I'm going to come at you. Yeah, you're right. Frankly, I think he was reserved.
I think he did excellent. Yeah, he was reserved. I would be flipping out.
Yeah, I have never.
Look at the Senate actually asking him questions about, what him and his friends in high school, what words meant.
I heard White House yesterday.
So
just
crazy.
And what people forget is you have to pay very close attention to the language that's used. White House, when he was making his comments yesterday before the confirmation vote, said, and these are quotes, he flat out said that Devil's Triangle doesn't mean a drinking game, that alumni doesn't mean what the judge said it meant. These weren't, it's my opinion that this was not what you meant. He was making statements. He has decided that it doesn't mean what the person that wrote it says it means, with absolutely no evidence at all. But I have never talked about this publicly, but in 2010, my relationship with my ex had been deteriorating for a few years. And I'm going to jump around a little bit. At the end of the day, I got her on tape 3 times admitting to making false domestic violence complaints. She admitted she did it to try to get me in trouble. I even have it on tape, and I took it to the police, and they basically said there's nothing we can do about it. At the end of the bigger point is going to what we were talking about, how hurtful it can be. When she finally left, I stayed at the house. Connor was a baby. He wasn't even 8 months old yet. And Shai was in kindergarten, I think, if I remember correctly. But the point being, we both agreed that it didn't make sense to transfer schools for her with like 3 weeks left in the school year. And I don't even know if they would have let us with that little bit of time left. So we agreed that she was going to stay at the house with me. And at one point, I walked past her bedroom and like little kids do, playing with a soccer ball. She was laying on a soccer ball in her bedroom, kind of rolling back and forth across the floor. See it a lot. But something about it just caught my attention, and it seemed like it was almost obsessive in a way. It just didn't fit 100%. So I mentioned to my ex the next day when she came over to see the kids, I said, hey, this is what I saw. You might want to have her, checked out by the pediatrician. I don't, it's nothing serious, I don't think, but it just struck me as odd. And I apologize for jumping around so much. I had decided when my daughter turned like 3, for me personally, it just felt uncomfortable to see her naked. It was just like, okay, you've reached that age where I just don't feel comfortable with this anymore. So mom's going to have to give you a bath, or, you can pull the curtain shut while you get a bath, and we'll only put a little bit of water in it, and I'll stand outside the door. But Daddy doesn't want to see that anymore. It just doesn't feel comfortable to me. Right. So a couple of days goes by, and I get a call from the local police department that I need to get to the hospital immediately, that there are allegations of inappropriate sexual contact with my daughter. Because she's traumatized that her mom has walked out, and I was sleeping on the couch in the living room, and every night she would come out and want to be consoled and cuddled, and she'd wind up falling asleep with me.
Right. Perfectly
normal behavior for a 5-year-old.
It is.
Absolutely. So the pediatrician, they never came out and said, we think you're doing something inappropriate. They alluded to it in such a way that it could sound plausible, but without risking getting in trouble for making a false accusation. You know what I mean?
Right.
They were very careful in how they described it. But my ex went so far as trying to hurt me to even subject our daughter to a totally unnecessary and invasive medical procedure by a specialist to confirm whether or not something had happened. And of course, nothing had happened. And it turned out all it was a run-of-the-mill urinary tract infection. But my ex, in her zest to try to get me in trouble, convinced the pediatrician, at least suggestively,
right,
that it could have been. And therefore, more examination was required. And that was incredible. Like, I was outraged. How dare you even have such a sick thought? Such a revolting thought. How could you even, you've known me for 14 years, and you actually think I'm capable of something like that?
Right.
And that's something I will never forgive.
What has been the fallout for you, Dan, being falsely accused of something, a crime, a very serious crime? And I know that, you're a smart enough guy to prove it, to, show it to be false, and you got her to admit it on tape that she made it up. But what would you suggest to other men that don't, maybe have the wherewithal to fight the allegations, yet, their lives are destroyed. They find it, they can't prove themselves innocent.
Right.
They've been they've been treated unfairly. They haven't had equal access to the law because somebody makes an accusation, and the accusation alone was sufficient enough to trigger, an investigation, or in your case, your daughter had to go through, a test. What would you advise to men? I mean, how do you get over that?
It took me a long time to get over being furious at her. Not only for the other things that went on, but for subjecting a child to a totally unnecessary and invasive procedure.
Right.
Because she was so adamant that she was going to try to hurt me.
Very unfortunate.
And I was upset.
Kids out.
I was furious on the level as if it had been a stranger that had harmed my daughter. You know what I mean? Even more so. The only thing I can say is, I was smart enough to know that I was in a one-party state, which means it's a state where only one party has to know that you're recording a conversation, whether it's in person or on a phone. So I had a digital micro recorder with me, and there would be times we were talking, and I would have it running, and she had no idea, and I would slowly but very subtly steer the conversation where I wanted it to go, and I got her to admit to all of it on tape. The thing that was most frustrating for me was taking the evidence to the police that she lied, and they basically shrugged their shoulders. At the very minimum, I have proof that this woman has now made 3 false accusations of domestic violence, which is filing a false police report, period. Granted, it's a misdemeanor, but it's a pattern of behavior that I'm proving. And they weren't interested. They were just like, yeah, whatever. Too bad.
And I want to confirm to the public that this is something that's going on inside the family court system. And custody battles.
Yes.
So you have mom and dad, in a divorce situation, and they are fighting for, custody. And what we've seen over time is that women, more so than men, use this order of protection, to in their own favor. So whether the allegation, the complaint is made, in good faith or not is irrelevant. What the order of protection does, it puts them in good favor with the judge
right.
in court case for custody. And I see a pattern of that myself, just following corruption in the family court system. So I've seen a pattern of women using orders of protection. So they have to go to a police officer. They make a complaint that's something that they feel threatened. There's a reason they feel threatened. And now that puts them in better favor, as I said, to the judge. Mm-hmm. So this is all manipulative. It's all very, very deceitful. But on top of that, it's also very hurtful because what some people do, and I think it's crazy, right? So I don't, I understand couples, they don't get along anymore. They want to separate. They want to get a divorce. Whatever the case is, that's their prerogative.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against that. It's your choice. I don't want to tell people what to do.
Right.
But there's absolutely no reason to involve, specifically involve these kids and specifically make false allegations that ruin people's lives.
Right.
I'm 100% supportive of 50-50 parenting. I think it's something that states should pass in their legislature because we have real problems with dads and moms and this bickering in family court. And I think the lawyers, they're making money. So they kind of keep, they keep it going. And in fact, this is true fact, family courts take in more money goes through family court system than all the other court systems combined.
Yeah.
Because it's especially particularly, people with money, have assets and are battling out in court, and the kids and the finances, it becomes like 10, 20 years sometimes in court.
Yeah.
Now the allegations just come flying out. This parental alienation is very real, but it's based on deceit. So what I'm asking the American people to understand is that deceit happens. And it's the reason why we hold so dear this concept that we're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This concept is so important. It's very easy to make allegations, and it's for personal gain, right? It's not in search of the truth, which is what justice is.
It's funny you said that about personal gain, because people have been asking all week, well, what does she have to gain by coming forward? What does she have to gain? She has nothing to gain and everything to lose. Except that as of last night, there were multiple GoFundMe accounts that are now totaling almost $1 million. I'd say that's something significant to gain. $1 million?
Hold on a second. I'm going to ask you to pause for a second. Do you my daughter?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know. She's getting on my nerves. Luca, don't keep this. I'm going to put, just pause me for 1 second. I got to tell my daughter to shut up. I can say that because she's my daughter.
Right.
Excuse me. Allison, I'm on the show. I can hear you humming. Get out. Alrighty. I totally missed what you said, the last points. I want you to make that.
I said for
okay,
all.
Hold on. Okay, Luca, I'm gonna cut that out. Please, thank you. Okay, count to 5 and then continue.
I said all week we've been hearing about, well, what does Blasey Ford have to gain? What does she have to gain? She has nothing to gain and everything to lose. And yet, as of last night, there are multiple GoFundMe accounts that have been set up that have raised over $750,000 for her. That sounds like quite a bit to gain.
That's a lot to gain. And I think that, they're paying her expenses. They're probably paying her attorney's fees. I mean, she's absolutely has something to gain here. And it's unfortunate that, we do, because Brett Kavanaugh deserves the due process, we do have to look at it. So you can't just make a complaint and say, I believe you.
Well, I want to
not look at the facts. You have to look at the facts, otherwise there's no due process for the person being accused.
I want to circle back to something you had mentioned before, and both of us having a background in criminal justice, and go, to touch a little bit on abnormal criminal psychology. And people have talked about this a little bit in the Senate hearings. I think it was even Lindsey Graham. It might have been Ted Cruz. I don't remember who it was. But if we are to believe that Judge Kavanaugh was a serial sexual predator in high school. So I just wanted to circle back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, and I hate jumping around like this. It just kind of happens sometimes. But with both of us having a background in criminal justice and some of the things that we've been talking about over the last week, and I think it was Senator Graham that said it. It may have been another one, but they mentioned, if we're to believe that Brett Kavanaugh was a serial sexual predator in high school, that behavior doesn't change. You don't all of a sudden graduate high school and become a straight-laced Boy Scout. It's a predictor.
Right, exactly.
It's a predictor of future behavior. When someone is a serial sexual assaulter, there are only 2 things that stop them. Either they get caught or they die. They don't just stop on their own one day.
I think absolutely true. And and also the people that you're around who have firsthand knowledge about you, you know who the bad guys are. You know who the good girls are. You have some kind of impression. And there has not been not one person with firsthand knowledge who knew Brett Kavanaugh during high school, and plenty of people did. In fact, the opposite happened. So we had about 55 women come forward who knew Brett in one aspect of his life personally, whether they were colleagues or friends, and all they had to do was talk about, what a good guy he is, how they could trust him, how his demeanor around women was always respectable. So now, just because that one, we have to look at the motives. We have to look at who's paying her way. All of these things are I don't have to just believe her. I can look at all these facts and determine whether or not I find her to be credible. So I'm asking the public to do the same. And during this hearing, if you find that Brett Kavanaugh is innocent until proven guilty. There has been no guilt proven at all. And you support the Constitution. I mean, you support the process. Everybody gets due process. You have to call your representative in the Senate and tell them to confirm Kavanaugh already. We don't want this freak show. This is not about Me Too. This is not about the Democrat Party and their success. This is about a real man who's being I believe, falsely accused of something, criminal. And it's just not your moment. It's not the Democrats' moment. If they had elected a Democrat, if they elected Hillary Clinton, they would be able to choose which nominee they want. But the people didn't vote her in, okay? The people voted for Trump, and you and the representatives have to respect that.
Yeah.
Stop with the anti-Trump bashing. It's not. I don't think it's doing the party any good. They need to put forward good candidates who have a good message that resonates with the American people, that the American people can relate to, and they can be successful. This constant bashing the president, I don't think is doing the Democrat Party any good.
It's almost, I feel like almost like election night where I didn't go to bed until it was actually where Hillary had conceded, because what I was seeing being reported was too good to be true. I didn't want to believe it. I just couldn't. There was no way I was going to get to sleep until I heard her concede.
I was so glad.
Because it was so implausible that he was actually going to win. And I want to believe so badly that most Americans are so disgusted with what has gone on in the last 3 weeks that they are going to go to the polls in the midterms on November 6th, and they are going to send another message that we are tired of these gutter politics. We are tired of there being a two-tier justice system where the powerful elite are held to a different standard or no standard at all, while the rest of us are thrown under the bus for the most minor transgression. I want to believe that. I don't know that I can believe that.
I think it's going to happen because elections matter. People.
I hope so.
People they watch the media, but they watch it with a grain of salt. And a lot of surveys have been done to this respect. It's like 75% of the people who follow the news don't really trust it.
Right.
So people are taking the news with a grain of salt, and everything you see on television is not always what's actually going to happen. So we learned that lesson when Trump got elected, thank God. But we are definitely this hour was so awesome, such a great topic, and I'm so glad that we can get it out, tell our side of the view. I think the mainstream doesn't always tell.
No, not at all.
Doesn't give the whole picture. So I hope that people can get the whole picture through this.
Yeah.
And I definitely support Brett Kavanaugh. I want you to have the last word.
The only thing I can say as a final word is guys, I think the midterms in a month or so are in some ways even more important than the presidential election in 2016. The progressive hierarchy has shown us where they intend to take this country, and it's not pretty. You're going to be guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. They're going to ram their policies down our throats whether we want them or not. They are going to control and seek to control every aspect of your life. And you're either going to get on board with their program, or you're going to be demonized, vilified, marginalized, and physically attacked. Even if Kavanaugh is approved by the entire Senate next week, you have got to go and vote on November 6th and send another resounding message to the progressive left that we want nothing to do with their policies and put them out to pasture where they belong.
I couldn't have said it better. Okay, I just want to thank you again for coming on. And come back again real soon.
Okay.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Dan. God bless you.
Thank you.